Impeachment Commission was first put together, although it was obvious with how long it took and how little money was given to it that it was never really a serious attempt to get to the bottom of things. And then once the commission was finished and the former members spoke out, that view was cemented, and everybody realized that it was just a cover-up. So honestly, it's just, having the misgivings that I originally had and knowing what I knew about previous events where the public was not told the truth, it got to the point where it became apparent that, certain mechanisms were not going to kick in, and the system was not going to correct itself. It became obvious that this corruption was going to go unpunished, and that, as you said, this event was going to be used as a pretext for a whole agenda that was put in place, prior to September 11, 2001. So I just reached the point where, like many other concerned citizens who have donated far more time and effort than I have, after researching the event, reading about it online or in books, or going to see people give presentations, speakers who don't believe in the official story, all this kind of added up to me just wanting to do something about it myself, just as any concerned citizen would do. If you're somewhere, you want your voice to be heard, you want to believe that you live in some semblance of a democracy, it was just a case of putting my money where my mouth is.
Well, if you see something, say something, but it's like this airline pilot sees that the airports are wide open for everybody but the pilots and passengers. He puts out a video. They raid his house. Now there's going to be a congressional investigation. Now the feds are backing off the pilot's courage. We learn they only want us not trusting each other and spying on each other. They don't want us seeing buildings blown up in front of us to use our own common sense. But to use the football analogy, which I use a lot, not just when I have a two-time Super Bowl champ on with me, I can clearly say now that they were winning 9 years ago. About 3 years ago, we began to fight back and started to turn the tide. But I have to say, 9/11 Truth wasn't winning until about the last year or so. And now this Buildingwhat.org campaign, I think, has really been a game changer, Mark. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's had a definite impact, and that's the reason why the people involved chose to continue, because they could see that the effect that it was having, they were certainly getting bang for their buck, and they were accomplishing what they originally set out to do, which was to have this demolition shown on TV. I believe on the day of September 11th it was shown once and never shown again. So it's just a case of getting it out there and educating the public. People who have not seen this building go down, some who are not even aware of it, can now look back on it with a different perspective, with maybe a little bit less emotion clouding their judgment. Now that they're a little bit removed from that day and can respond and view something more with logic and less with just gut reaction, maybe people will be a little bit more willing to open their eyes.
Well, here's the $64 million question. I want to throw it to you, Mark, and then, of course, to the engineer, Tony, who's here with us. But not just their overall agenda of global militarism and takeover that they've gotten through this staged event that Operation Northwoods previously discussed, where the Pentagon lays out why they want to stage big attacks on the homeland to be blamed on foreign enemies. If we don't expose the favorite tool of tyrants, false flag terror, that Hitler used in 1933 to really become a dictator, firebombing his own Reichstag. If we don't expose this, the system's going to do more in the future. I mean, they're not going to stop unless we break their stranglehold on this issue.
Well, that's true. I mean, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you have people who, they have the military hegemony that the U.S. has now throughout the world, when you have ownership of the corporate media and you can control the message and censor any information that might come out, then that's what you will get. You will have democracy being subverted. It is up to people like those in New York, in NYC Can, And all the groups, like I said, firefighters, pilots, architects, and engineers from 9/11 Truth, it is up to those people to be involved in truly what is a citizens movement. I'm proud to be involved because it's a grassroots movement. I empathize with the people that had family members die that day. That could have been any one of us. Those people were just victims of circumstance, and now their family members are left with a bunch of unanswered questions. That could be any one of us. If any one of us was in that situation, we would be doing the same thing. Some people were, in a sense, bought off by the settlement money that was paid out to the remaining family members. But there's a small percentage that was not, that continued to fight and to push this issue because they don't want to let it go, because they know that they're being lied to. So it's just, like I said, I'm happy to be a part of it. And, sometimes I get the attitude from people that, hey, he's just an ex-football player. What does he know? And I tell people, fine, don't believe me, don't listen to me, because there are people far more educated in this area than I am who have every bit as much, if not more, skepticism than I do. If you don't want to believe me just because I'm a guy that used to play football, that's fine.
Yeah, what about the former German defense minister, the former head of German intelligence, the former Italian president? What about all these thousands of architects and engineers? What about all the police and firemen I've talked to and medics who heard the Building 7 countdown? What about the police on video saying, get back, they're going to blow up 7? It's all right there in front of us. And then you get into all of the other evidence. That's why this Building What campaign is so important. Buildingwhat.org. We've got it up on screen for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers. But before we go back to that, I want to play the original Building What ad. And this all started because they were trying to go to the city of New York to have a ballot initiative for a new investigation. They're at the city level of 9/11, and their petitions got thrown out. And the judge said, Building What, when they brought up Building 7. So that was the genesis of the Building What campaign. Here is the public service announcement with family members of 9/11 victims. Here it is.
I lost my son,
my nephew,
my uncle,
my son
on September 11th, 2001.
Most people don't know that a third tower fell on September 11th.
World Trade Center 7, a 47-story skyscraper, was not hit by a plane.
Although the official explanation is that fire brought down Building 7.
Over 1,200 architects and engineers have looked into the evidence
and believe there is more to the story.
Bring justice to my son,
my uncle,
my nephew,
my son,
and thousands of others who died on September 11th.
Go to buildingwhat.org.
Buildingwhat.org, and Mark Stepnoski is going to give $10,000 to this. He hopes that you will match him. I know that I'm going to give a donation today, and again, I get nothing from this except the truth and a future for my children. Mark doesn't. All of this is going for these TV ads. I hope you will give generously, because we have seen a huge effect, because this is very effective. At first, it shows Building 7 falling, something most people haven't seen. The media never wanted to cover it then or afterwards. You never hear about Building 7 in the media. But it also shows victims. Now, I've had some of the heads of the biggest 9/11 victims' families on the show. I'll get them on about other issues with 9/11. And in every case, I say, what percentage of your group believe it's an inside job? And they say more than half. And I've been on the streets and had firemen and police shake my hand, the majority of them. I've had commanders salute me when I've been down there. The cops know, the firemen know, they know. They're not stupid. They know that they were told the air was safe to breathe, and internally the EPA knew how deadly it was. They've been fighting for 9 years to block health care for the people down there. It's incredible. Going back to the mechanical engineer, Tony Szamboti. Tony, other points you want to add or that you want to put out here today for listeners?
Well, I just wanted to say, I wanted to repeat what I said on Gerardo's show, that there's an absolute proof. I tend to try to follow, and I think what the Building What campaign is doing is, the KISS principle, keep it simple and straightforward. And Building 7 does that. And like I said on Geraldo, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. I can't stress that enough, for that building to go in the free fall acceleration in a natural way. For 8 stories, 8 13-foot tall stories, or 105 feet. Because when columns natural collapse columns would have to buckle. And when columns buckle, there's a minimum resistance. It's what we call asymptotic. You guys probably saw this in school. It's when the curve comes down and never drops down to the x-axis in an XY graph. And in this case, the buckling resistance is significant. It's not even near zero. It's 10 to 25% of the intact strength. So what I want to say there, it's not just 10 to 25% of the resistance because you have a factor of safety. The columns in Building 7 were anywhere from 3 to 5 was the factor of safety. In other words, they could support a load above them that was 300 to 500% greater than what they actually had on them. So when I say it retained 10 to 25% of its intact strength, that means even if they were buckling, completely scissor folded, they could still support a load that was 30 to 75% of the load that was on them. That means it can never go to free fall. It's completely impossible.
So let's say one level did buckle. It wouldn't have been symmetrical, A. B, you would have had it collapsing in chunks. It would have taken time for each floor to collapse. And there's another area that I know you can quantify. I forget the exact term they use. But the pile was too short. These things had been blown in to manageable sections, just like a controlled demolition.
Well,
you didn't have a...
Yeah. Right. A lot of people say that. What NIST tries to say is that they had an internal failure on the east side. The east penthouse went down, and that internal collapse progressed from east to west completely. And then all of a sudden, the entire exterior shell, which was standing on its own prior to that, comes down in free fall. Well, that's impossible because they try to say, Alex, that it's a multi-story buckle. That's very, very unlikely to have happened with that complete sheet because those column connections on the outside columns were moment resisting. The whole face is not going to buckle. And in addition to that, well, if the east side was coming down inside and the outside and the whole thing came down, why wouldn't the east side perimeter come down before the west side? Why wait till the whole building, the whole interior was down before the whole building to come down? That's not what happened. What really happened, that east penthouse came down a little. That was dropped for some reason. But then the whole interior was dropped just a split second. And you watch the top, the HVAC area, the parapet up on top, the heat exchangers, that area just dips in the middle. It's a little past the middle of the building. Then the whole exterior drops. It goes into a sudden collapse.
Well, sir, from structural engineers I've talked to, and then I've seen the Las Vegas implosions, with that design of a building, you want to blow the central columns first so that when you blow the others, it doesn't fall out and damage other buildings.
That's right. You want to leave it with the center so it drags in. It just puts a little force on the outside, pulls it inward a little bit so that everything comes down with a little bit of an inward pull and then comes straight down. That's exactly why it's done. What you just said is exactly why.
Beautiful job. Beautiful job.
It would have been, it was, in fact, the largest classical or traditional controlled demolition in history, Building 7.
Yeah, I mean, it was a masterpiece. They tried to blow up the Intel building here in Austin. It was a modern building they never finished because Intel had financial problems. They built it in '99, blew it up just a few years ago, and they failed. Mark, I mean, again, it's hidden in plain view, Mark.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to something that Tony said about just keeping it simple. There's never been a building collapse due to fire, ever. You know, when you look at what NIST is trying to say and you know, everything else, they're trying to get people to accept an impossibility. It's physically impossible. You know, Tony can back me up on this, I'm sure, with a much more educated opinion, but diesel fires that were burning in Building 7 are carbon-based fires. And carbon-based fires cannot get hot enough to melt steel. It's physically impossible.
You're absolutely right, Mark. Stay there. Final segment. Man, this hour has gone fast. Folks, be part of this history-making event. Join the team for